Hey everybody, this is Dream, and today we have a huge 11-game slate. We have players all over the spectrum when it comes to ability and stuff today. We have good pitchers at different price points that we think are probably going to be okay to utilize. And then we have some wild cards as well. We have four teams, kind of a fifth team as well that I like as a stack. San Diego, Toronto, Philadelphia, and Texas are all stackable teams. And then I'm also going to include Cincinnati as a potentially stackable team against Patrick Corbin, because Patrick Corbin has not been good this year at all, and he's been giving up home runs and things, and I definitely like to target him. Some of the other pitchers I also like to target is Pivetta for Boston. It just seems like every time he goes up, he gets shelled, and he's going up against Tampa Bay. So there's another team as well that you could potentially look at as a stackable guy. Team, excuse me. And so for the pitchers that I like today, so I have two top tier pitchers. I have two middle of the road pitchers and two lower level pitchers. My top two are Max Scherzer and Verlander. I mean, for obvious reasons, they have the best runs against. They are going to strike out to most people. And then they have the best, they're actually going up against relatively easy teams compared to a lot of the other pitchers. And, they have good, decent matchups and obviously can score a lot of points because of their strikeouts. Not a whole lot I can say other than they're extremely expensive, and so it might be pretty hard to get both of them in the lineup. So I would say pick one of them, and then hopefully one of the other guys I mentioned are going to be somebody that you're going to like. So the next guy is Sean Manaea for San Diego, mostly just because of going up against Cincinnati, who hasn't been very good as of late. Sorry, not Cincinnati, Kansas City, who hasn't been very good as of late. And it is a plus matchup for him. He hasn't been quite as good, but he has, he still can get strikeouts. And while he's giving up some home runs and stuff, I think Kansas City is going to have a hard time getting to him. And even like against Washington, he had a game where he only gave up one run. It was a home run though. He is a little bit wishy-washy, like you can see in his points. But like I said, I think he's a decent option. You're not going to get 35 points out of him, but if you can get like 15 to 20, then that might be okay. And then the other is Noah Syndergaard against Pittsburgh. Pittsburgh's been really bad lately. The only real issue with him is the strikeouts. He hasn't been striking people out as much as you'd like. But he's also, he has potential to. He's getting 6 a couple games. In fact, he actually did against Kansas City. Of course, he's playing Pittsburgh, but Manaea's playing Kansas City. He's still a game where he's got a pretty low run total, so I think he can probably keep the earned runs pretty low. And if he can get some strikeouts, he can stretch himself into a 20-point game. Look at a little bit of both of those picks. They're not ideal, but that's one of the reasons they're a little bit less expensive, in the 8,000 range. And now the other picks, and I might like this guy slightly more than those two, is Ross Stripling from Toronto going against Los Angeles Angels. There's really only two guys on the Angels lineup that are really a huge risk for him, which are Trout and Ohtani. And but overall, he's been okay the last several games, and he does pretty good at home for the most part. Though he does give up a few more home runs, he does get enough strikeouts where he can probably make it worthwhile. Plus, he's going to get the LA Angels, and they strike out a lot. Excuse me, I'm sorry. The final guy, and he's kind of a Hail Mary pick, is Mr. Arihara for Texas Rangers against Detroit. Now, Detroit was actually pretty good today because they were going up a pretty bad pitcher. And I will say, he was a bad pitcher last year, a really bad pitcher. But he's had 2 games so far this year, and he's actually done okay. If you combine the stats for the 2 games, he's actually doing okay. He actually did good against Minnesota, which was kind of a surprise. He didn't really get strikeouts, so you're not going to expect a lot. But if you can get 15 points out of him for $6,700, I feel like that's probably okay. He's a little overpriced, but if you're just needing super amount of value at pitching, then he might be somebody you want to take a look at. There's just not a whole lot down there typically, and to even find a guy that even has a couple statistics that go in his favor, it's worth taking at least a look at him. But like I said, I definitely don't necessarily recommend him as a top tier option by any stretch of imagination, or any of the bottom 4 guys I mentioned, but they are guys that you can pivot off of one of the expensive guys in order to be your second pitcher. So let me go ahead and get this into the catchers. We only have a couple catchers today. The cheap one is going to be Christian Vasquez. He's been hitting the ball 407 in the last 10 games. He actually is a bit of a home run threat, even though he hadn't hit one in those 10 games, so he's kind of due. And he has a pretty good matchup against Baltimore. And then the other two, my favorite pick of the day is JT Realmuto. Obviously, he's been just incredibly smashing the ball 400. And, Philadelphia is in a nice place where he can really just, if you can stack a couple guys, he's probably the guy you want to stack the most. And then the other, if you like him more than JT Realmuto, is Alejandro Kirk. He's been playing pretty well. He took a game off just to rest, and then Danny Jansen came in and hit a home run. So just make sure that he's playing, but he's a really solid option as well. And that's pretty much what I have at catcher. We got a expensive guy, a pretty expensive guy, and then a cheaper guy. And, if you like, you should be able to find some value in any of those three to hit, potentially a home run, which is what I look for at catcher. At first base, I have 5 guys selected. My top tier option, and I think this is probably the best play of the day of all the players available, is Nate Lowe for the Texas Rangers. He has absolutely been crushing the ball lately. He's had 5 home runs in the last 10 games. My goodness, he's just been unbelievable. And he's still only $3,800. Like, they have not adapted to his insane last, month of time, essentially. Since August, 36 for 93, which is 387. That is insane. So, he's somebody that I think it's almost a must roster player. But if you need to save more money, I have 2 guys that you can choose from. One of them is Yuri Gurriel for Houston, who hasn't been quite as good as you would like, but he's still pretty solid lately. And then Solano for Cincinnati. He's going up against Patrick Corbin, and he's been hitting the ball very well. He doesn't really hit home runs much, but he does smash the ball and get base hits and score runs and gets RBIs. And so he doesn't really hurt you too bad, especially at his price point. Even if he only scores 5 to 7 points, we can feel okay with that. And then I have 2 expensive options, which are Rhys Hoskins and Vlad Guerrero Jr. And Vlad Guerrero Jr., he speaks for himself. He's going against LA. He has home run potential every time he comes to the plate. And it just seems like this is going to be a situation where he's going to be beneficial. And, I will say Hoskins, he's got the upside for being in the Philly stack and gets a really bad pitcher. He hasn't been quite as good lately, but he's kind of due for a home run, and so that's why I included him. At second base, I have 6 guys that we can choose from, and my top tier options are Jeff McNeil, who's kind of in a similar situation as comparable to Nate Lowe, only he's not as big of a home run hitter by any stretch, but he's just hitting the ball really well, and I really like him quite a bit just based on that, and he's still pretty inexpensive for what he's been doing lately. Obviously, if he gets much more expensive, I wouldn't be that interested, but at that price, he's really good. And the other one is Wilmer Flores, who hasn't been hitting the ball quite as good as we'd like, but he still feels like he's kind of due for a big game, and he's got a good matchup where it could potentially come. And then 2 other guys that are one other guy that's not too expensive is Segura for Philadelphia. He seems pretty safe. He's been hitting the ball well at 333 with 8 points, fantasy points per game. And then I have a couple more expensive guys, which are Marcus Semien and Jose Altuve. Semien has been hitting the ball and getting 9.1 fantasy points a game, and Altuve has been averaging 10 points a game at 333, and he's also been getting some home runs, which he definitely has the potential in this particular game as well. And then one other pick I have, I don't like him as much, but I'm just going to go ahead and include him because he's an option that in a good matchup is Jonathan India, and he's been getting 8.5 points a game last 10, and he's got home run and triple potential, and even a stolen base potential. And so we like guys like that sometimes, in plus matchups. And Cincinnati looks pretty decent from that perspective, especially because a lot of their guys are a little bit cheaper. Now his prices come up, so just be aware of that. Third base, I have two top tier guys. They're in a price range that you can probably be okay with. One of them is Yandy Diaz. He's probably my favorite of them. He's been batting really good and getting a lot of fantasy points the last 10 games. 351 with 11 fantasy points a game. He's also been exceptional against Boston this year, averaging 13 points per game. And so he's definitely one of my top picks. The other pick is Alec Bohm, or Boom, I guess, for Philly. He's also been hitting the ball pretty well lately. Not quite as good as Diaz, but he's been good enough that we feel confident that he can, get us some fantasy points in this particular game against Pittsburgh. So I actually have one cheap guy that's kind of a secondary / Hail Mary, kind of the super cheap, and that is Isaac Paredes. He has home run potential, but he has low batting average. But like I said, he's in a position against Boston, against a pitcher I like to go up against, and that gives him some potential because he does have some big games here and there. And then another guy is Kyle Farmer for Cincinnati. He's just got a plus matchup, and he's cheap, and you like that when you can get it, and he has some potential for to score some points. He's averaging 7.3 the last 10. Then I have two expensive guys. Alex Bregman. I mean, he's just been absolutely killing the ball, 12 points per game, and Manny Machado, who hasn't been quite as good as Bregman, but he has a lot of potential as well. And I think San Diego is going to have a really fun game against Kansas City. So that's pretty much what I got third base. At shortstop, I have five guys. I couldn't really find a whole lot here that is super cheap. Basically, if you just need to throw somebody in cheaper, then Jeremy Pena is your guy. He hasn't been particularly great, but he's kind of safe. And then another guy who I actually like a lot, which I don't normally like him that much, but he's absolutely just been killing the ball, 378 last 10, is Kim for San Diego Padres. He's not a huge home run risk, but he's just hitting the ball well, 9.4 points per game. He's probably my top pick outside of this one particular player, which is Bo Bichette, who had been in a slump, but he's starting to get out of it, and he's just due for a home run. And sometimes he gets on a roll, and I think he might be starting his roll now. So if you like either of those guys, and those guys are going to be useful to the roster. They have two expensive guys, Lindor and Seager. Now, I don't really love Seager so much, but he's in a good spot. And then Lindor has actually been hitting the ball pretty well, 8.8 last 10. And so I definitely like him. I'm sorry, he's not the last 10. That's actually, I think I had that backwards on my sheet here. But anyway, he's been hitting the ball pretty well, and he's a pretty safe pick against Colorado's pitcher. And so I like him as a expensive option if you can afford to pay up. So in the outfield, I have several players that are pretty cheap, and I'm just going to kind of mash through these. So Lourdes Gurriel for Toronto, he's been in a good position as of late, and he's been playing well. He's $4,400. Not super ideal, but he's in an okay position. Jake Fraley for Cincinnati, he's still super cheap at $2,800. I'm surprised his price hadn't come up some, but he has real potential to score a crap load of points at a time or two. He's gone up against the pitcher who likes to give up home runs, and he likes to hit them. And what a better matchup, So then I have a couple guys from Milwaukee and Hunter Renfroe, Christian Yelich, and Andrew McCutchen, and I would order them in that order, though I will say Yelich has been really mashing home runs lately, so maybe him and Hunter Renfroe would be a good two-person tag team to throw into your lineup. They're both at the $39,000 and $4,000 range, pretty inexpensive. And then Manuel Margot for Tampa Bay and Eloy Jimenez for the Chicago White Sox. Both are kind of not doing quite as good as you would like them to do, but they're in plus matchups. and they have some potential. You could also say the same for Andrew Vaughn and Tyler Naquin. I like both of those guys as well, and they're in the 36 to 3900 range, which is where I like to get a lot of my outfielders. And then I have one cheap outfielder who's kind of a Hail Mary, which is Will Myers, and I'll show you him on screen. He hasn't, he doesn't do anything super awesome, but he's cheap and he's pretty safe. And, he's in a plus matchup and he can actually get some big points. He's got 2 home runs the last 2 games, and so we look for him as a possible option. Then I have 4 expensive options, and those guys are Juan Soto, George Springer, Kyle Schwarber, and Bryce Harper. All 4 of these guys are in plus matchups against bad pitchers, and they're all home run threats. If I had to rank them, I would put it Soto, Harper, Springer, and Schwarber. Schwarber's been a little bit less ideal lately, but he still has a lot of upside, and he's kind of due for a home run. So that's pretty much what I got for this slate. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you do like it, please like, comment, and subscribe. And feel free to share it on any of your social media if you want, or with friends that are playing. I am trying to grow the channel some here, and I'm pretty happy with how it's going so far. I've been playing DFS for many years, and I don't know why I didn't decide to do this sooner. I do enjoy I do all the research every day anyway, so I might as well share what I find and how, kind of go into what I do when it comes to lineups. And I like to see people win. So if you do win stuff and you see my video, feel free to post the video below, post about, if you win something below. And have a nice day, guys.